Black and White, by Liu Jiming, translated by Chen Gang, Part 2, Volume 3, Chapter 6, 1. As if a world away, Song Xiaofan had finally returned to Dajiang, a city she had been away from for over a decade. As soon as she got off the plane, she greedily inhaled a few breaths of Dajiang's distinctive air, humid and cool. Despite it being winter, it lacked the dryness of the north. It felt like swallowing a bite of ice cream. The wind wasn't as biting as it was in the north, where it felt like knives cutting your face. This felt more like applying snow cream to your face back when she was an educated youth in the countryside. Her delicate skin would tingle, tighten, and then relax, leaving her feeling exceptionally refreshed. Song Xiaofan secretly reveled in this literary association, thinking it was perfect for the educated youth novel she planned to write. Having been abroad for so many years, Song Xiaofan rarely wrote novels, especially those about the lives of educated youth. But since returning from the United States a year or so ago and staying in Beijing for a while, memories that had been sealed away for years seemed to have been unlocked, stirring something within her. She wondered if this had anything to do with her cousin Hong Tai-hung's documentary literature, Heavy Snow is Coming, which chronicled the lives of educated youth in the Great Northern Wilderness. Last time, Song Xiaofan was initially supposed to return to Dajiang with her cousin Yanbei and her cousin's husband, Ba Dong. But because her studio was preparing to adapt Heavy Snow is Coming into a television series, her cousin specifically requested that she serve as the screenwriter, but it was delayed until she finally returned close to the Spring Festival this year. Du Wei was the one who picked up Song Xiaofan at the airport. Since their last meeting in Beijing, the two had maintained constant contact, mainly due to the matter of the public listing of the Polipar Art Media Group. She played the role of a liaison in the middle. Because of this, her contact with Du Wei exceeded that with her parents. After deciding to return to Dajiang, she called Du Wei to pick her up at the airport. Having been abroad for so many years, she had lost contact with past acquaintances and friends. Who else could she turn to besides Du Wei? Come to think of it, she hadn't even called her parents a few times in total during this year or so since returning from the United States to Beijing. Thinking of this, Song Xiaofan felt a pang of guilt and turned her gaze towards Du Wei. At this moment, Du Wei was stuffing her 2 suitcases into the Audi trunk. The 2 suitcases were too big, and Du Wei had to put much effort into squeezing them in. In the middle of winter, he was actually sweating on his forehead. Having been abroad for so many years, Du Wei had taken great care of her parents. Every time she talked to her family on the phone, her father would always mention Du Wei, his tone so affectionate that he practically treated Du Wei as family. Song Xiaofan suddenly realized that Du Wei was, after all, the chairman of a company preparing to go public. It felt a bit inappropriate for him to be acting like a porter, carrying things for her. At this time, Du Wei closed the trunk, thoughtfully opened the car door, made a very gentlemanly gesture to Song Xiaofan, and said, "Sister Fan, get in." Du Wei's "Sister Fan" sounded very natural, and Song Xiaofan felt very affectionate. She responded naturally, as if she and Du Wei were truly siblings. Back when they were studying at Dongjiang University, Du Wei always respectfully called her Teacher Song. Song Xiaofan sat in the back seat. She eagerly asked Du Wei about her father's health along the way. Du Wei said that in previous years, the old man often felt dizzy and had to stay in the high-ranking cadre ward of the provincial direct clinic several times a year. But since he started practicing Yuan Jigong, his blood sugar had been very stable, and he had stopped taking insulin. Now, he practices the exercises in the morning and writes in the afternoon. His spirit is great. These years, Song Xiaofan was most worried about her father's diabetes. When she was in the United States, she would buy some advanced medicines for treating diabetes and mail them back to her father every year. Song Xiaofan had seen many reports about Yuan Jigong in the media. Yanbei had also mentioned it after returning from Phoenix Island to Beijing last time, but she only had a superficial understanding. Now, hearing Du Wei's words, she was a little surprised. That Yuan Jigong, is it really that miraculous? Due said, "If you don't believe it, ask the old man yourself when you get home." Seeing that Due was very serious and thinking that Yuanji Gong's Wu Bozhong was his godfather, Song Xiaofan said nothing else. After a while, Due asked, "Sister Fan, why don't you ask about your mother?" She chuckled. "My mother is almost 20 years younger than my father. I'm not worried about her at all. Last year, not long after I returned to Beijing from the United States, it just so happened that she went to CCTV to record a program. After the recording, I accompanied her for a day in Beijing. She was radiant and looked even younger than me." Hearing Song Xiaofan say this, Due also laughed and turned his face from the driver's seat. "That's right. Auntie has been full of energy since becoming the leader of the provincial elderly women's choir, and she goes on tour several times a year throughout the province. Our Dongjiang Pictorial plans to publish an album of them soon, and I took the photo of Auntie on the cover." The airport expressway was built after Song Xiaofan left Dajiang to go abroad. The Audi sped along the expressway, and it only took half an hour to enter the city. The rows of high-rise buildings outside the car window made Song Xiaofan feel both strange and familiar. In her memory, Dajiang was a relatively underdeveloped city in mainland China, always jokingly referred to as a large county town by people from Beijing and Shanghai. But the prosperous scene that entered her eyes at this moment was no less than that of Los Angeles and Seattle in the United States, so much so that she felt a sense of unreality, as if she had arrived in a city she had never been to before. After all, she had been away from Dajiang for over 10 years. In over a decade, not to mention a city, she had even undergone many unexpected changes. 2. Utopia. Song Xiaofan and Li Xin had obtained one-year visas as visiting scholars. Because they were invited by the United States Information Agency, USIA, their status naturally differed from others. Li Xin was especially adorned with a series of dazzling labels such as famous mainland Chinese writer and dissident. Universities and organizations across the United States flocked to invite him to give speeches, and each time, officials from the USIA accompanied him. The entourage and how he was treated like a star were just as impressive as high-ranking officials traveling in China. Song Xiaofan followed Li Xin like a shadow on every trip. Although they hadn't undergone formal marriage procedures, and Li Xin only introduced Song Xiaofan as his assistant in formal settings, people in the circle knew they had been living together before going abroad. Many people were familiar with their love story, and they often talked privately about the legendary story of them being arrested as prostitutes by the police while meeting in secret at a hotel in Dajiang City. However, their talk had no malice. Rather, it was treated as a romantic tale, along with criticisms of mainland China's human rights situation. At that time, Li Xin was definitely a high-profile and positive figure in the American Chinese community. To pursue his ideal love, he didn't hesitate to give up high-ranking positions and prominent status in the literary world, taking his beloved woman to the free world. This was not only romantic, but also had specific, realistic political significance. For a while, when American media reported on Li Xin, they also focused on love and politics, almost portraying them as a prince and Cinderella from a Shakespearean drama. This made Song Xiaofan feel somewhat uncomfortable, but only somewhat, because Li Xin had indeed left for the United States largely because of her. Otherwise, Li Xin would still be thriving in the Chinese literary world at this moment. The reason for saying largely rather than entirely was that Li Xin's final decision to come to the United States also had a personal reason. He was coming to the United States to inherit an inheritance. However, because he had previously stated in various articles that he would never betray the motherland to inherit his father's inheritance in the United States, for him, in the name of love was, of course, nobler than in the name of inheritance. Song Xiaofan was well aware of this, but she didn't care. After all, she believed that they truly loved each other. When she first arrived in the United States, Song Xiaofan was full of freshness towards everything. She followed Li Xin from Los Angeles to New York, from Seattle to Texas, from San Francisco to Chicago, from the West Coast to the East Coast, almost traveling all over the 50 states, big and small. Once, she and Li Xin were invited to attend an international writers' conference in Little Rock, Arkansas. The so-called international writers mainly came from Asia and Latin America. Most participants were dissidents. There were also a few from mainland China and Taiwan, and 2 of the mainlanders were former colleagues of Li Xin. President Clinton was born in Little Rock and served as Arkansas's governor. As soon as the conference began, news spread that he would personally attend the meeting, host a banquet for the participating writers, and give an impromptu speech. Everyone was very excited. For this reason, Li Xin expanded his originally planned 10-minute speech to 20 minutes, and he even read it to Zong Tianyi, asking her to provide suggestions for further revisions. She had never seen Li Xin so excited. It was as if Chinese people were paying homage to the emperor in the past. However, President Clinton did not come to the end of the conference. It was said that he had temporarily canceled his trip due to a matter. Li Xin was greatly disappointed by this. When he returned to the hotel room, he tore the speech to shreds, threw it into the toilet, and flushed it away. But no matter what, for Zong Tianyi and Li Xin, those were the golden years they spent in the United States. It was a pity that the good times didn't last long. After the 1-year visiting scholar period expired and the USIA stopped paying them more than $2,000 a month, they had to find their own way to make a living. If Li Xin had successfully inherited his father's inheritance, Li Shimo, he and Zong Tianyi could have lived a life of worry-free food and clothing in the United States. But who knew that something unexpected would happen? Li Xin's several half-siblings from his father's side fought fiercely to get a larger share of the inheritance. Not long after Li Xin arrived in the United States, they allied and turned their spearheads towards Li Xin, demanding that he provide legal proof of his father-son relationship with Li Shimo. According to American law, he could not become an heir to the inheritance without legal proof. To prove the father-son relationship between Li Xin and Li Shimo, it was necessary to establish whether the marriage between Li Xin's father and mother was legal. According to American law, children born out of wedlock have no right to inherit an inheritance. However, Li Xin's mother passed away many years ago, and Li Shimo also passed away 2 years ago. Li Xin had no way to obtain these 2 proofs. Li Xin was unwilling and filed a lawsuit against his several half-siblings. As a result, not only did he not win the lawsuit, but the millions of dollars of inheritance that Li Xin could have received vanished into thin air. Even the 2-bedroom property under Li Shimo's name, where they had been living for free after arriving in the United States, was taken away, and in the end, they had to pay for their own rent. Neither of them had brought much money when they went abroad. In desperation, Li Xin applied for funds from the Carter Foundation to publish a collection of his speeches in the United States. With this money, they managed to gain a preliminary foothold in the United States. Neither Li Xin nor Zong Tianyi was the type of person who lived a frugal life. In addition, the cost of living in Los Angeles was higher than in New York. Although the East District, where they lived, was the area with the highest concentration of Chinese people in Los Angeles, and the cost of living was relatively cheap, the rent and electricity bills, telephone bills, and gas bills they paid each month still exceeded their economic capacity. Li Xin's manuscript fee was almost exhausted in less than a year. Later, they had to save every penny they could, even the money to buy milk and bread every morning. The rented house was also changed from the original 2-bedroom to a 1-bedroom, and life became increasingly difficult. There was no way, so they both started to find ways to earn money. At this time, the political aura surrounding Li Xin had disappeared completely, and he had long lost the popularity he had had when he first arrived in the United States. Not only were there few organizations inviting him to give speeches anymore, but even those Chinese newspapers that had previously flocked to him for articles had lost interest in him. Once, Li Xin wrote a short essay and submitted it to a newspaper to earn some living expenses, but it was rejected. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to Li Xin, who didn't understand foreign languages and had no skills other than writing. He stayed home for several days in a row, sighing and seeming to have suddenly aged several years. Seeing that Li Xin, once a famous figure in the domestic literary world, had fallen into such a state of decline, Song Xiaofan also felt very uncomfortable. Soon, without Li Xin's knowledge, she found a job washing dishes in a restaurant in Chinatown. Although she had to work 12 hours a day from morning to night, she could earn more than $200 a week, nearly $1,000 a month, enough for their monthly expenses. On the day she received her first salary, Song Xiaofan specially ordered a 12-inch Sal's pizza. Li Xin loved to eat pizza the most. When they first arrived in the United States, they used to eat pizza once a week, and Sal's pizza was specially ordered. Due to financial constraints, they hadn't eaten pizza for a long time. Therefore, when Song Xiaofan bought a pizza and a bottle of red wine from the nearby Sal's and returned to their residence, Li Xin was overjoyed and danced joyfully like a child. It was already dark, and the narrow room was dimly lit. Li Xin lit candles, and the two sat facing each other, their faces full of festive joy. Song Xiaofan cut the pizza with a table knife and placed it on the plate before Li Xin. Suddenly, Li Xin's gaze fell on her hand, and his expression was somewhat horrified. "Xiaofan! Your hand!" Song Xiaofan was stunned and wanted to pull back her hands, swollen like a corpse from washing dishes for a long time, but it was too late. Li Xin tightly grasped her hands, stroking them while saying guiltily, "Xiaofan, you haven't washed dishes since you were a child, have you? Alas, it's all my fault. I originally wanted to take you abroad to enjoy life, but I've made you suffer like this." Hearing this, Song Xiaofan felt a pang in her heart, and tears almost fell. This went on for half a year. One day, when Song Xiaofan returned from work, Li Xin told her good news. A publisher named Lin from Taiwan had flown to the United States specifically to find Li Xin, wanting to ask him to write a book, and had paid a deposit of $5,000. This is only a quarter of the manuscript fee for the entire book. After completing the manuscript, the rest will be paid in one lump sum. Li Xin, reversing his usual depression, took out a $1 check from his pocket with a joyful expression and waved it in front of Song Xiaofan. $5,000, $20,000 in Song Xiaofan's eyes was a huge sum of money, enough for her and Li Xin's living expenses in Los Angeles for 2 whole years. Ria, really? She felt overjoyed and a little unbelievable. "What kind of book?" Li Xin said, "A book about the inside story of high-level political affairs of the Chinese Communist Party." "High-level is how much high-level politics do you know?" Song Xiaofan was stunned and muttered, "A novel or history?" "Neither a novel nor history," Li Xin said lightly. Seeing the puzzled expression on Song Xiaofan's face, he explained, "There is a popular type of documentary literature in mainland China now that specializes in describing and revealing the secrets of the lives of Chinese Communist Party leaders, half true and half false, and it has a large market both at home and abroad. If the sales are good, royalties will be paid separately." Song Xiaofan originally wanted to say that this was just the kind of stall reading material that relies on selling political rumors to attract attention. But seeing Li Xin's excited expression, she didn't continue. From that day on, Li Xin began to get busy. The book he was preparing to write was called Records of Ups and Downs in Zhongnanhai, and the content was the so-called inside story of the Chinese Communist Party's high-level power struggles that many overseas Chinese were keen to talk about. Li Xin first bought a large pile of books and magazines from Chinese bookstalls, found some secrets and anecdotes from them, and then used his expertise as a novelist to fabricate and piece them together, pretending to be the tone of a deceased secretary of a Chinese Communist Party leader who had moved overseas. Li Xin spent less than a month from the start of writing to the completion of a book of more than 200,000 words. 2 months later, Records of Ups and Downs in Zhongnanhai was simultaneously launched in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the United States. When it was published, Li Xin didn't use his real name but a pen name, Jing Fu. Due to pretending to be the oral account of a secretary of a Chinese Communist Party leader, which increased the credibility of the book's content, Records of Ups and Downs in Zhongnanhai was very popular after its publication and quickly became a bestseller, even entering the top 10 on an overseas book chart. Soon, boss Lin remitted a royalty to Li Xin as promised in the contract and invited him to write another book. This time, the advance manuscript fee was $5,000, double that of the first book. The second book, Mao Zedong's Women, was still completed in less than a month. Then came the third book, Zhou Enlai's Women. In less than 2 years, Li Xin wrote several books in succession, and the publishing house compiled them into the Jing Fu documentary works series, which stirred up a considerable Jing whirlwind in the overseas book market. As Jing Fu's reputation grew, manuscript invitations also increased. Li Xin once again became a hot figure. However, this time, he was known as a best-selling author, and few people knew that Jing Fu was the famous serious literature writer Li Xin, who once enjoyed a high reputation in the mainland literary world. Some publishers came to see Li Xin with leather bags full of US dollars to compete for the manuscript, and before the contract was signed, large stacks of US dollars were placed in front of him. With more and more similar scenes, Li Xin learned to wait for a higher price. His father was a capitalist, and he originally had the genes of a businessman. Before coming to the United States, he was also a leader in the literary world, so dealing with publishers was effortless for him. As a result, the royalties given to Li Xin by the publishing house continued to increase, and he became even busier than before. To complete the manuscript invitations from the publishing house, Li Xin asked Song Xiaofan to quit her job washing dishes in the restaurant and return home to work as his assistant. At that time, they had already moved from the original 1-bedroom apartment to a 3-bedroom apartment. The new residence was not far from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, was much more spacious than before, and had an elegant environment. It was considered a relatively high-end apartment building in Los Angeles. However, Song Xiaofan didn't expect her spiritual and emotional life to develop problems while her material life improved. As Li Xin's assistant, Song Xiaofan's job was to buy a large pile of miscellaneous books and magazines from the bookstalls, pick out functional materials according to Li Xin's writing outline, and make clippings. Usually, she had to make 2 large albums of clippings for each book Li Xin wrote. This mechanical and simple work only required a pair of scissors and a bottle of paste, similar to a female worker working on an assembly line. After doing it for a long time, her brain became numb, so much so that she forgot that she was once a writer herself. She unconsciously developed a sense of boredom, feeling that washing dishes in a Chinese restaurant was better than being in contact with this messy and low-level text garbage all day. It was even more meaningful to wash dishes. Washing dishes was washing away garbage, while her work now was creating garbage. She felt sick and almost vomited. She began to doubt her choice for the first time. If coming to the United States was to live this kind of life, was it worth it? Of course, she could say she was doing it for love, her and Li Xin's love. Yes, from the moment she met Li Xin in Yandang Mountain, she had a deep sense of worship and passion for this man who was only a few years younger than her father. What happened later was a natural development, from Li Xin coming to Dajiang to meet her secretly to her having to jump out of the scandal after the incident was exposed, leaving Dajiang to live openly with Li Xin in Beijing despite her parents' opposition, and then to the 2 of them coming to the United States together. All of this was for love. The ideal love that she had been longing for since she was a girl, but had repeatedly been frustrated in. For this, she was willing to abandon all of her own and pay any price. Before going abroad, Song Xiaofan had written a novel called Utopia. The novel's female protagonist began searching for ideal love as a girl. From the Republic of China to New China, she experienced the anti-rightist movement, the Cultural Revolution, and the reform and opening up. Every man she loved eventually left her, not because of death, but because of emotional breakdown or political reasons. As a result, she was still alone in her old age. Despite this, the female protagonist insisted on her belief in love from her girlhood. As soon as this novel was published, it was widely praised, and her label in the literary world changed from educated youth writer to representative writer of feminism, bringing her more fame than her award-winning debut, Xiangchun Street. Deep down, Song Xiaofan was still the little girl who locked herself in a small room, immersed in rosy dreams and unwilling to extricate herself. This was also why she had always liked Duras and Woolf. When she went abroad, to reduce the weight of her luggage, she gave up almost all of her literary books, only keeping To the Lighthouse and The Lover. After coming to the United States, she discarded some superfluous items in several moves, but these two books remained inseparable, like a faithful lover. Song Xiaofan sometimes thought that her own love was also a utopia. But now, Song Xiaofan's utopia had cracks. The cracks didn't appear suddenly. There had been signs long ago, but they hadn't attracted her attention or vigilance. For example, in the past, whenever there were social activities, whether it was meeting with publishers or attending literary activities, Li Xin had to take her with him, even if it was as an assistant. But who in the circle didn't know they were already husband and wife? After Li Xin received the manuscript fee for Women of Zhongnanhai, he had promised Song Xiaofan that when the next book was published and they earned more money to buy a big house, they would officially register their marriage. But now, the Jingfu series had been published for a long time, and the house had been changed twice. Li Xin never mentioned the matter of marriage again. Of course, the more critical signal was that Li Xin retrieved the key to the safe from Xiaofan. The safe held all the deposited royalty checks, payment slips, and cash. The key was transferred from Song Xiaofan's hand to his. Since then, the living expenses at home had also changed to being withdrawn from Li Xin on a monthly basis. This change made Song Xiaofan suddenly feel that her relationship with Li Xin had changed from that of husband and wife to master and nanny. When Song Xiaofan realized her situation, it was too late. At this time, Li Xin had already been living with a woman who had recently come to the United States from China. The woman was called Tang Shi and was several years younger than Song Xiaofan. Before coming to the United States, she was a teaching assistant in the Chinese department of Peking University. When she was in college, she liked Li Xin's works, and her graduation thesis was on Li Xin. Li Xin once signed his name in her notebook when he went to Peking University to give a speech. Later, the two had several correspondences. After Li Xin went abroad, they lost contact. Not long after, Tang Shi also came to the United States and studied comparative literature as a graduate student at Columbia University in New York. By chance, Tang Shi met the Taiwanese publisher Boss Lin and learned that the best-selling author Jing Fu was the famous writer Li Xin she knew, so she came to Los Angeles from New York specifically to see him. It is conceivable what kind of spark was ignited in the hearts of the two admirers and the admired when they reunited in a foreign country. From then on, Li Xin and Tang Shi fell in love. At first, Li Xin only secretly used his social or literary activities to date Tang Shi. Sometimes Tang Shi flew from New York to Los Angeles to see Li Xin. Sometimes Li Xin flew to New York in the name of attending a meeting to see Tang Shi. The dates became more and more frequent, as passionate as those of young people. The relationship between the two was almost public in the Los Angeles Chinese cultural circle, except for Song Xiaofan, who was kept in the dark. Later, she went to Chinatown to buy some daily necessities and passed by the Chinese restaurant where she used to wash dishes. The female boss saw her of the restaurant. The female boss was Taiwanese, and Boss Lin had once invited her and Li Xin to eat there. As soon as the female boss saw Song Xiaofan, she greeted her enthusiastically. Song Xiaofan didn't have a good impression of this female boss. She was skinny, and the powder on her face kept falling off when she spoke. She also had a relatively mean temperament, especially towards people from the mainland. When she first arrived at the restaurant, she accidentally broke a bowl, and the female boss asked her to pay for the money for 2 bowls at double the price. Seeing her being so warm to her, Song Xiaofan felt a little uncomfortable instead. As expected, after exchanging a few greetings, the female boss suddenly lowered her voice and asked, "Miss Song, are you and Mr. Li not together anymore?" Song Xiaofan remembered that the female boss had always called her Mrs. Li before, but now she had changed to Miss Song. She felt a little strange and carefully pondered the other person's words. "Not together? What do you mean by that?" "I mean, Mr. Li came to my place to eat a few days ago. Why weren't you with him?" The female boss stammered, and Song Xiaofan became even more suspicious, so she asked, "Mr. Li, who was he with?" "A young lady. She looked less than 30 years old, very fashionable." The female boss squinted at her with an ambiguous tone. "Looking at how affectionate they were, I thought Mr. Li had broken up with you, Miss Song, and had a new love." Hearing this, Song Xiaofan felt like she had been slapped in the face in public and left without saying a word. A few days later, Li Xin was told that a publisher would invite him to dinner, so he dressed neatly and drove out in his BMW. The BMW had only been bought recently, and Li Xin always drove it. Song Xiaofan had only sat in it a few times in total. Usually, she went out by bus or subway. When Li Xin left, Song Xiaofan called a taxi and followed behind him. More than half an hour later, her taxi followed the new BMW into the neighborhood near UCLA. Due to its proximity to the university, forests surrounded this area, and the environment was quiet. The house prices were higher than in the East District, and many wealthy Chinese people lived here. The BMW stopped in front of a cream-colored, 3-story detached villa that looked at least 80% new from the outside. As soon as Li Xin exited the car, a young woman with long hair walked out of the gate. Seeing Li Xin, the two hugged each other, and then they walked hand in hand, as intimately as a family, towards the gate. Watching the gate of the cream-colored villa slowly close in front of her, Song Xiaofan was struck by lightning and stood there in a daze. It took a long time before she woke up from her dream. After returning, Song Xiaofan checked the information on the villa on the website of the Los Angeles Real Estate Department. The purchase date on it was less than half a year ago, and the owner of the property was written as Li Xin's name. Song Xiaofan understood everything. Li Xin had bought this villa behind her back and made it a secret place for him and Tang Xu to meet. For many years, Li Xin had always been worshipped as an idol in her heart. But now, this idol suddenly collapsed with a crash, turning into a pile of rubble. The next day, she left Li Xin. 3. Number 1 South Lake Road. After returning home, Song Xiaofan's first feeling was that the villa, which had previously seemed luxurious and imposing in her eyes, now seemed so dilapidated, like an elderly person with an atmosphere of gloomy, damp decay emanating from every corner. The exterior walls of the villa were almost completely covered with morning glories. The lush greenery was fine in spring and summer, but now it was winter, with all plants withered and flowers fallen. The withered vines of the morning glories exuded a musty smell, as if coming from an ancient tomb, which could even be smelled inside the house. On the first day after returning home, Song Xiaofan saw a gecko with its limbs spread out on the bedroom wall. She had been afraid of geckos since childhood and screamed in fright. Zhao Yi was called in to look, only to find that it was a withered vine that had crawled in through a crack in the window. Like that of a person, the life of a house must also go through the process from youth to old age and death. This process occurs imperceptibly from the inside out. After living at home for 2 days, Song Xiaofan discovered that the toilet in the bathroom was broken. The downstairs bathroom was public, one in her parents' bedroom upstairs and one in her bedroom, for a total of 3 bathrooms. All 3 were broken. After washing her hands, the toilet couldn't flush, so she had to use a prepared plastic basin to scoop water and flush it. She was very uncomfortable and felt unclean every time she went to the bathroom, even after washing several times with soap. Her parents didn't feel any inconvenience at all, seemingly accustomed to it. She asked Zhao Yi why she hadn't called the logistics department to repair it. Zhao Yi said it had been repaired several times, but always broke again soon after. If I call the plumbing master to repair it again, they will get annoyed, and I will be embarrassed. Zhao Yi smiled wryly. Yes, now all the people living in this courtyard are retired old cadres. There is not a single leader in office, so who cares? In previous years, newly appointed provincial leaders would come to visit Old Song, but in recent years, there have been fewer. After not seeing each other for more than 10 years, Zhao Yi was more talkative than before, and she also looked much older, just like this house. Of course, it was not only the house and Zhao Yi that were aging, but also her father. Song Xiaofan felt that her father looked much older than before and had a change in temperament. In the past, every time she came home, her father would put down his work, no matter how busy he was, and talk to her, and they would also take a walk by the lake together. After the father and daughter talked for a while on the first day after returning home, he locked himself in the study. He rarely came out except for meals. Out of curiosity and the desire to get closer to her father after being away for so many years, Song Xiaofan went to the study upstairs and found that her father was neither reading nor practicing calligraphy, but with his eyes lowered and his hands clasped in front of his chest, sitting upright in the center of the study. A red linen carpet with a Tai Chi pattern was spread on the floor. Song Xiaofan was about to ask Dad what he was doing when Zhao Yi gently patted her shoulder from behind and whispered, "Shh, don't disturb old Song, he is practicing Qigong." Song Xiaofan tiptoed out of the study and turned her face to ask, "What? Qigong? Is my dad practicing?" "I'm not very clear, but your dad has to practice it every day," Zhao Yi said with a somewhat mysterious expression. Song Xiaofan remembered what Du Wei had said on the way home from the airport. "Is it called Yuanji Gong?" Yes, Yuanji Gong, that's the name." Zhao Yi clapped her hands and said, "Your dad's blood sugar has been very stable since he started practicing this Qigong. He also advised your mom to practice it, but she is busy with the choir all day, so she doesn't have time." Song Xiaofan felt that the only one who hadn't changed much was probably her mother. Although she was over 10 years younger than her father, she was now in her 60s. After several years, she also retired from the position of deputy director of the Provincial Foreign Affairs Office. However, she was still as energetic as in the past and loved excitement and socializing. In addition, she was well-maintained and went to the beauty salon for a treatment once a week, so she still looked charming and didn't look much older than before. If she put on makeup again, she would be as charming as she was when she was young. Her mother really couldn't stay idle. Except for the first day, she came home when she stayed at home with her. She went to organize the choir the next day, saying that she wanted to rehearse a program for the provincial TV station's Spring Festival Gala. She left the family's affairs to Zhao Yi to care for, so she didn't need to worry about them. On the third night after returning home, Song Xiaofan was suddenly awakened by the cold. She felt like she was sleeping in the water, shivering all over. She jumped out of bed, holding the quilt, and touched the radiator. It was ice cold. She didn't know if the radiator was broken or if the entire community had stopped heating. Because it was midnight, she didn't want to disturb her parents next door and Zhao Yi downstairs, so she had to find a blanket from the closet to wrap herself in and endure the night. She discovered the community's heating equipment was broken after getting up the next day. The community's heating equipment is still from more than 10 years ago, and it should have been replaced with new ones long ago, but the province hasn't had the money to replace it, so it has been delayed like this. Zhao Yi explained. "Whenever the heating stops, the house is like an ice cave. I'm fine. I can handle it by putting on an extra quilt, but your dad and mom are delicate. How can they bear it? I had to buy them an electric heater. When you came back, I was just so happy that I forgot to buy a heater for your room, but who knew it would be such a coincidence that the heating equipment broke down again as soon as you came home?" Seeing Zhao Yi's guilty expression, Song Xiaofan, who was initially angry, felt a little embarrassed instead, so she comforted her. "Zhao Yi, it's not your fault. Besides, it's not a big deal. Can't we just go buy a heater?" Hearing this, Zhao Yi nodded repeatedly. Yes, I'll go buy a heater for you right away." Song Xiaofan hadn't left the community since returning home and was thinking about going out for some fresh air. Hearing Zhao Yi say she would buy a heater, she said, "Zhao Yi, I'll go with you." When she returned home from the airport, Song Xiaofan ignored the surroundings when entering the compound because she was in Du Wei's car. Today, when she walked out of the South Lake community with Zhao Yi, she realized that the heavily guarded sentry box and sentries at the entrance were gone. The iron gate was still there, but it was covered with rust, and several iron bars in the middle were missing, not knowing whether they had rusted away or had been sawed off. It wasn't closed tightly like before, but was open, and there wasn't even a guard at the door. People could enter and exit without any hindrance. A door number sign was at the compound's entrance, South Lake Road Special Number 1. Song Xiaofan remembered that the compound had no name before, only vaguely called South Lake Community. A sign with no loitering was erected on one side of the gate, giving people a mysterious feeling of being deterred. But now, Song Xiaofan felt that this compound was as dilapidated and declining as the old house at home. It was no different from the communities where ordinary people lived. 4. Chinese New Year. As the footsteps of the Spring Festival grew closer day by day, Song Xiaofan, who hadn't spent the New Year at home for more than a decade, felt a surge of excitement, just like when she was a child. In the past, Zhao Yi would always go home for the Spring Festival, but since her husband died in a car accident a few years ago, she had no children and was all alone, so she no longer went home for the New Year. Zhao Yi was capable and a cousin of Song Xiaofan's mother, so they usually got along like family. Her mother entrusted her with everything related to preparing for the New Year and was happy to save herself some worry. By the 24th day of the 12th lunar month, the Little New Year, the New Year's goods that needed to be prepared at home were almost all ready. Du Wei came on the morning of the 28th day of the 12th lunar month. He drove his Audi directly to the building and carried down large and small bags from the trunk, including sausages, cured pig trotters, glutinous rice cake, and dried bean curd threads, all New Year's goods with Wuzhou characteristics. Accompanying Du Wei was a short woman with a large face and curly hair, helping him transport the New Year's goods in a whirlwind. Zhao Yi, who was cleaning, also came out to help. Song Xiaofan had just come down from the second floor and almost bumped into the woman. She quietly asked Zhao Yi who the woman was. Zhao Yi said she was President Du's wife. Old Song likes the New Year's goods from his hometown. President Du and his wife have been sending New Year's goods yearly for the past few years. At this time, Du Wei and his wife unloaded things from the car and were busy moving them into the kitchen and storage room. The couple was so familiar with the process that they felt as if they were in their own home and didn't act like outsiders at all. After finishing, Du Wei came over to greet Song Xiaofan. "Sister Fan, these things should have been delivered a few days ago, but I was caught up in the company's year-end summary and couldn't spare the time. I only managed to deliver them today." He smiled apologetically and called the woman over, introducing her. "This is my humble wife, Jiang Lili. She was transferred from Wuzhou a few years ago and works in our group's finance department. These Wuzhou specialties were all made by her own hands." Hearing Du Wei introduce her, Jiang Lili smiled and imitated her husband's tone, sweetly calling out, "Sister Fan, you had been eating Western food in the United States. I'm afraid these cured meats won't suit your taste, right?" Song Xiaofan didn't know how to answer. Zhao Yi happened to come over and continued the conversation. "We also prepared some cured meats in the market these days. Xiaofan eats them very deliciously." Song Xiaofan felt a little embarrassed hearing Zhao Yi say this. "Old Song is practicing Qigong in the study again, right? I won't disturb him. I'll come to pay New Year's greetings to the two elders in a few days." Before they could finish exchanging pleasantries, Du Wei suddenly lowered his voice. "I got news this morning that Vitsu Minister Lang's father-in-law, that is, old Principal He Shouwu of Dongda, Old He, has passed away. Alas, it's right before the New Year, enough for Vitsu Minister Lang to suffer." His face showed a look of grief, as if it were his own father-in-law who had passed away, not Vitsu Minister Lang's father-in-law. "Sister Fan, please pass this message on to Old Song for me. I must rush to Dongda to help Vitsu Minister Lang handle old He's funeral." After he finished speaking, he left in a hurry with his wife. Only after Du Wei left did Song Xiaofan realize that Vitsu Minister Lang was Lang Tao. On New Year's Eve, Zhao Yi made a large table of dishes, so many that Song Xiaofan couldn't even count them all. It was said to be a reunion dinner, but it wasn't really a reunion. Her mother went to perform at the Spring Festival Gala at the provincial TV station and wasn't eating at home. The family and Zhao Yi were only 4 people, so the New Year's atmosphere was naturally less festive. No matter how delicious the dishes were, they tasted a little bland. Song Xiaofan poured half a glass of rum she had brought back from the United States for her father and herself. Zhao Yi couldn't get used to foreign wine and drank the white wine she bought herself. The 3 clinked glasses, and Song Xiaofan deliberately made the glasses clink loudly, but she still couldn't find the festive flavor of the new year. As they were silently drinking, she heard her father mutter, "Where's Luo Yi? Why hasn't she come to eat yet?" Song Xiaofan was stunned and laughed. "Dad, you're really forgetful. Didn't I tell you that Mom went to perform at the Spring Festival Gala at the provincial TV station? We're going to watch her performance later." "Song Lao practices Qigong too intently and easily forgets things," Zhao Yi joked. "He usually misses Luo Yi the most. He asks where she is whenever he doesn't see her for a while." Zhao Yi was 2 years older than her mother, Luo Yi, and occasionally called her by her first name. Seeing the thoughtful expression on her father's face, Song Xiaofan remembered that she hadn't told her father about He Shouwu's passing. She hesitated even more at this moment, thinking that it was the new year, so she should wait 2 days to tell him. Thinking this, she said, "Dad, don't you think something is missing this year for the new year?" "Missing what? Your mom is missing," her father replied without thinking. Seeing that her father's thoughts were still on her mother, Song Xiaofan was both touched and felt that her father was old, forgetful, and seemingly immersed in another world. This made her a little sentimental, and her nostalgia increased a bit. "Missing." Seeing the father and daughter become silent, Zhao Yi said somewhat presumptuously, "In previous years, 2 days before New Year's Eve, provincial leaders would come to the compound to pay New Year's greetings to Old Song and several other old leaders. This year, none came. It's really a lot more deserted." When Zhao Yi's voice fell, Song Xiaofan saw her father put his glass on the table before him and said irritably, "If they don't come, they'll cause me less trouble. I'll have a peaceful and comfortable time. Why not?" Song Xiaofan heard a trace of loneliness and depression in her father's words, but she didn't know how to comfort him. After wandering abroad for more than 10 years, the time separation made her feel that there was something between her and her father. Her father was old, and she was already middle-aged, but these were not the real reasons. What was the real reason? She couldn't say and couldn't help but feel a slight melancholy, murmuring, "Missing the sound of firecrackers." "You're right, Xiaofan," Zhao Yi said. "Not long after you went abroad, the city banned firecrackers. People aren't allowed to set off firecrackers for New Year's, festivals, and red and white happy events. Anyone who violates it will be fined 500 yuan, and those who cause serious consequences will be detained." Song Xiaofan gave an "oh," and remembered that when she was a child, every household would take out the prepared firecrackers and fireworks to set them off during the new year. The deafening sound of firecrackers rose and fell one after another from New Year's Eve to the morning of the first day of the new year. But tonight, on this New Year's Eve, the surroundings were silent, as if she were in a deserted desert, unable to trace the New Year's atmosphere. After dinner, Song Xiaofan accompanied her father, who was sitting on the sofa in the living room. Then she turned on the TV and prepared to watch the live broadcast of the Spring Festival Gala. Both the central TV station and the provincial TV station had Spring Festival galas. In the past, at home, Song Xiaofan and her parents would argue about which gala to watch, but today there was no need to discuss. They directly tuned the TV to Channel 1 of the provincial TV station. After Zhao Yi had cleaned up the kitchen, she also sat down to watch the show together. Song Xiaofan had known from the program schedule that her mother's program was the chorus, "Let Us Row Our Oars." This was the theme song of a movie called Flowers of the Motherland in the 1950s, but it only became popular in the 1980s. Not only her parents, but also Song Xiaofan liked this song. It could be said that this song could mobilize the emotions of her and her parents' 2 generations. For a long time, the Spring Festival Gala was held by the Central TV station and various provincial and municipal TV stations, and it was a regular program every year. It was originally a lyrical solo song for children, but after being changed into a chorus song, it had more of a majestic and heroic spirit. Her mother served as the lead singer in the program. On TV, her mother wore a performance costume, and her temperament was dignified and elegant, looking much younger than usual. Her mother's voice was clear and loud, a bit like Ma Yu Tao or Guan Mu Chun without losing its kindness. These were also her mother's 2 favorite singers. Song Xiaofan still remembered that the family hung large photos of them at home. "It's a pity that your mother didn't become an actress and change careers to become a cadre." Her father sang along with the TV while gently tapping his fingers to the beat, saying half admiration and half pity. When she was the head nurse before, she was the lead singer of the amateur choir of the Provincial People's Hospital. Seeing that her father's aged face showed a trace of redness that only young people had when he said this, was he recalling the scene of falling in love with her mother in the 1950s? Of course, for her father, the 1950s not only belonged to him and her mother, but also to his ex-wife. Although Song Xiaofan knew very little about her father's previous marriage, she still heard some directly and indirectly, most of which she learned from her father's memoir. She felt that, compared to the 1950s, her father might be more willing to recall the 1980s. The 1980s were her father's golden age. Of course, they were also her golden age. It was probably rare in Chinese history for an era to become the common spiritual background of 2 generations, right? Thinking of this, Song Xiaofan felt that the distance between her and her father had shortened a little. The phone suddenly rang as the provincial TV station's Spring Festival Gala was ending. The telephone was on the coffee table near Song Xiaofan. She picked up the phone and heard her cousin Yanbei's voice. "I have nothing else to say. It's almost the new year. I just want to pay New Year's greetings to you and Uncle." Yanbei's voice sounded very far away on the phone, a little indistinct. When Song Xiaofan left Beijing, Yanbei and Ba Dong sent her to the airport. She hadn't had time to call her back since coming back. Before her uncle, Hong Hu, passed away, her father would call to pay New Year's greetings every year. After her uncle passed away, her cousins began to call her and her parents to pay New Year's greetings. This was also a rule passed down from the older generation. She had been abroad for so many years and had forgotten this etiquette, but she didn't expect Yanbei to remember and call first. "I'll give the phone to my dad. Will you pay him New Year's greetings in person?" Song Xiaofan exchanged a few pleasantries and asked Yanbei, "Sister Fan, you can tell the old man for me. Last time I went to Phoenix Island with Ba Dong and played for a few days, but I didn't go to see Uncle. He must be very angry. If he scolds me, where will I put my face during this New Year's?" Hearing Yanbei's mouthful of Beijing dialect, Song Xiaofan chided, "You still know you're embarrassed. You should have come to see my dad last time. After you and Ba Dong got married, the old man hasn't seen him yet." "What's so good about seeing a living person?" Yanbei still laughed irregularly and quickly changed the topic. "I want to watch the gala. Have you seen Zhao Benshan's skit selling crutches? I went to the studio to see it during the rehearsal. It was hilarious. By the way, tell Uncle that my brother also pays him New Year's greetings and won't call separately." After saying that, she hung up the phone with a paw sound. Listening to the buzzing sound on the phone, Song Xiaofan was stunned for a moment, and Yanbei's giggling seemed to echo in her ears. Among the 2 siblings, Taihong and Yanbei, she had always gotten along well with Yanbei. This was not only because Yanbei liked literature, but also probably related to her personality. Don't look at her usually introverted and sensitive personality, but she always had laughter and jokes when she was with her, and said everything. Song Xiaofan felt that, in comparison, there always seemed to be a high wall between her and her cousin, Tai Hong. This was definitely not just because of gender. As soon as Song Xiaofan put down the phone, her father asked, "Who was that on the phone?" She thought that even though the old man was forgetful, his hearing hadn't diminished, so she quickly replied, "It was Yanbei, saying she was paying you New Year's greetings." She's still embarrassed to pay me New Year's greetings. The last time she went to Phoenix Island, she didn't come to see me at all, her father said with a displeased face. Yanbei said on the phone that she was too busy last time and will definitely come to see you next time. Song Xiaofan hurriedly made excuses for her cousin. Susan Tai Hong also sent word to pay you New Year's greetings. Hearing this, her father said even more angrily, "Don't mention Tai Hong. Where does he have me? This uncle in his eyes. He's probably forgotten his dad, too." "Dad, what do you mean by that?" "Didn't you stay in Beijing for a while? Haven't you heard that Tai Hang is now the Hong Ye of the capital? He's not only rich, but also has the ability to reach the sky. Even many of the top and second leaders of provinces and cities have to visit his wharf to get things done." It was rare to hear her father say so much in one breath after coming home. Song Xiaofan couldn't help but be a little surprised. Although she had stayed in Beijing for more than a year and knew a little about her cousin, she had only heard rumors, so she couldn't make any comments. "When I went to Beijing for meetings in the past, I often chatted with your uncle in that large house in Bingma Hutong for most of the night. Every time he criticized me, and I only had my share of being criticized. What could I do? From the anti-Japanese war onwards, he had always been my superior. From the 1950s, the thing he nagged about the most in my ear was to warn me not to engage in privilege. After the 1980s, it was not to regard reform and opening up as taking the capitalist road, and that we must never let our next generation become Gao Yane, a villain in Water Margin, and the 8 Banners' children, privileged Manchu aristocrats, as if he was always consistently correct. What was the result? You now rely on your pen to make a living, which is considered self-reliance, right? But what about the descendants of General Hong Hu? Isn't Tai Hong now a Gao Yane? If your uncle were still alive, where would he put his face?" Song Xiaofan felt that when her father said this, he had a bit of schadenfreude, which was too harsh. After all, her uncle had always been her father's superior. In her memory, her uncle had a strong northern accent and often squatted in the courtyard like an old farmer, tending to the grapevines. In comparison, her father had more of an intellectual air. Yes, her father had published a novel, Majestic Song of Great River, in the 1950s, which had a national impact. However, she still felt that her father's ridicule of her uncle just now was a bit petty. Was her father speaking the truth after drinking? Back then, her father was punished by the party for the Dongda student unrest and the South Lake Villa incident. Otherwise, her father's career, which was in full swing, wouldn't have suddenly ended, and he had been depressed ever since. In the United States, Song Xiaofan once drank most of a bottle of rum and didn't wake up for 2 days. That was how real rum was. When you drank it, you didn't feel much, but when the alcohol hit, people would become dizzy and talk nonsense. As expected, after her father finished speaking, he tilted his head and fell asleep on the sofa. Song Xiaofan remembered that from the first day of the Lunar New Year when she was a child, guests who came to pay New Year's greetings would come in an endless stream, and the threshold would be trampled on. They were all her father's subordinates and leaders from relevant departments of the province. After her father retired, this lively scene became less and less, but there were still some people sporadically, of course. Those were all her father's diehards, who had been floating in the officialdom all their lives. But this time, Song Xiaofan spent the new year at home, and from the first day to the 4th day, not a single person came to pay New Year's greetings. The house was quieter than usual, and she couldn't help but feel a little lost. However, the family, from her parents to Zhao Yi, seemed to be at ease, changing the patterns of the New Year's goods they bought and eating them every day. Her mother, who rarely cooked, seemed to want to make up for the guilt of not eating at home on New Year's Eve, and she personally made several of her signature dishes, winning applause from the whole family. Her mother made them herself and asked her to show off. "Xiaofan, you've been in the United States for so many years. Today, make some authentic Western dishes and let's taste foreign food." Her mother rarely had this interest in cooking, and Zong Tianyi was very willing to show off. Although she had lived in the United States for many years and had eaten American and European Western food, she found it really difficult to make it herself. She remembered that her father often visited foreign countries in the 1980s, and every time he came back, he would always pick one or two of the Western dishes he had eaten abroad and make them at home for her and her mother to eat. Her father made steak and borscht authentically, so she asked, "Doesn't Dad know how to cook Western food? The steak and borscht he makes are better than those in authentic Western restaurants. How dare I show off in front of an expert?" Her words seemed to remind her mother, who invited her father down from the study upstairs and forced him to make a steak. As a result, he didn't grasp the heat well, and the steak that only needed to be cooked medium rare was all burned. Seeing her father wearing the apron that her mother had tied for him around his chest, sitting at the dining table with a frightened look, like a primary school student who had done his homework wrong, Zong Tianyi laughed until tears came out. On the morning of the 5th day, the family had just finished breakfast when Du Wei came to greet her parents with New Year's greetings. There was also someone with him. No, to be precise, he was accompanying that person. At first, Zong Tianyi didn't see clearly. After the guests were seated in the living room, she recognized that the person whom Du Wei was following like an attendant was Lang Tao. Lang Tao had changed too much after not seeing each other for more than 10 years. When he stood on the podium and lectured on Heidegger's aesthetics, his elegance and handsomeness had once caused countless male and female college students to fall in love with him. Zong Tianyi remembered dancing with Lang Tao in the Maple Garden Ballroom. As expected of a sea turtle who had studied in Germany, his tango had an authentic German flavor, and she had a little trouble keeping up. At that time, Lang Tao was simply a male god among the girls at Dongda. Many were jealous of him, and the way that Li Hong, the president of the Langtaosha Literature Club, pursued Lang Tao was simply envious, more crazy than when she was in love with Cheng Guojun. But Lang Tao later married He Li, the daughter of Principal He. After hearing this news, she was a little disappointed, just like she later heard that Lang Tao had changed careers and entered politics. The current Lang Tao had gained weight all over. His face was so fat that it had changed its shape. He was wearing a silver-gray woolen coat, and when he sat on the sofa, you could still see his protruding belly. Although he wore glasses on the bridge of his nose, you could no longer see much of a scholar's temperament. He was no different from the officials often seen on TV. "Xiaofan. Sister, it's been many years." After Lang Tao paid New Year's greetings to Zong Tianyi's parents in a perfunctory manner, he turned his gaze to her and extended his hand. Zong Tianyi felt that Lang Tao's last sister was a bit forced and unnatural. In terms of age, she was a few years older than Lang Tao, but Lang Tao was her teacher when she was studying in the Dongda writers' class. And now, Lang Tao was a dignified Vitsu Minister Lang, so it was understandable not to call her sister. Thinking this, Zong Tianyi's mind flashed back to the scene of her and Lang Tao being locked in the Dongda guest house to revise the script of the TV series Dajiang Flows East. Lang Tao's eyes were wise, he was full of learning, and he had a surging passion and vitality. Lang Tao, Vitsu Minister. Zong Tianyi found the Vitsu Minister awkward, but she still said it. Lang Tao's outstretched hand was soft, thick, like a woman's, and a little damp. But Lang Tao's hand wasn't like this before. She remembered that when they were dancing in the Maple Garden Ballroom, Lang Tao's fingers were slender, his palm was soft, and when he placed it on her waist, it was neither tight nor loose, just right, as if a hand playing the piano was stroking the keys. She felt a little nervous, as if she had really returned to the Dongda campus of the Maple Garden Ballroom more than 10 years ago. But Lang Tao didn't continue to talk to her. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, he turned his face to speak to her parents. From his and Du Wei's respectful attitude towards her parents, especially her father, she could tell they had something profound to discuss. "Did the funeral of your father-in-law go smoothly? My energy was insufficient, so I didn't go to pay my respects to Principal He in person. I let Du Wei send a wreath on my behalf." Zong Tianyi tried hard to straighten his back. In front of the younger generation, he habitually maintained his dignity. Of course, Lang Tao was not just an ordinary junior in front of Zong Tianyi. Back then, after his Dajiang flows east was criticized, he gave up his professorship at Dongda and changed careers to enter politics, and it was Zong Tianyi recommended him. "Song Lao, my father-in-law, was still thinking of you before he passed away," Lang Tao said with a slightly sad face. "My father-in-law said that if it weren't for your strong recommendation, he wouldn't have taken the position of principal of Dongda." "You can't say that. Comrade Shouwu was an excellent educator and made important contributions to the reform and development of Dongda." Zong Tianyi waved his hand, lowered his eyelids, and said slowly, "Of course he suffered a little grievance in his later years, which was also due to my involvement. I am very saddened by his death." Saying that, he seemed to remember something and asked, "Is your father, well?" "Back then, your father-in-law and I were friends who shared hardships in the May 7th cadre school." "Oh, my father's health is good. Like you, he insists on practicing Yuanji Gong every day, and the effect is also good. He is writing a new book about Laozi, which is about to be completed. He said that he will definitely ask you for guidance after the book is published." Lang Tao nodded and said, and turned his face to Luo Yi, sitting next to Zong Tianyi and peeling an apple. "Auntie, my mother asked me to send her greetings to you. She praised the song Let Us Row Our Oars that you sang as the lead singer at the provincial TV station's Spring Festival Gala, saying that your voice didn't change for 20 years. Because it was the new year, Luo Yi not only accompanied Zong Tianyi in talking to the guests, but also peeled fruit herself, showing extra enthusiasm. After hearing Lang Tao's praise, her face immediately lit up with a smile, and she handed an apple she had just peeled to Lang Tao. Just as she was about to peel another one, Du Wei, sitting next to Lang Tao, snatched the fruit knife, saying, "I'll do it, Auntie." Luo Yi let go and handed a peeled apple to Zong Tianyi. Zong Tianyi took the apple and bit into it with his almost toothless mouth, continuing what he had just said. "Your father has been writing diligently and producing excellent works all these years. I will read every of his books carefully, but now my eyesight is getting worse and worse." At this time, Lang Tao glanced at Du Wei, sitting next to him, and changed to a formal tone, saying, "Song Lao, I came today not only to pay you New Year's greetings, but also for two things. One is about the biography of Zongda. I have officially ordered the publishing house to stop publishing this book and asked Du Wei to talk to the author. The second is that several leaders in the province originally wanted to come to pay you New Year's greetings, and they also wanted to hear your opinions. Still, they are preparing for the 2 sessions before and after the New Year, and since the new secretary has not yet taken office, it is not convenient for them to come forward, so they have entrusted me to come." "Has the candidate for the new provincial party secretary been determined?" Zong Tianyi asked casually. "Not officially appointed yet, but according to news from Beijing, it is the secretary of a sub-provincial city on the coast, named—" Lang Tao hesitated but didn't say the name of the new provincial party secretary, but he added, "I heard that he is a very ambitious reformer." "That's good. In any case, the pace of reform cannot be stopped." Zong Tianyi nodded slightly and said, "In recent years, the development of Dongjiang has been clearly lagging behind the coast. That's because the main leaders in the province are a little conservative in their thinking." Hearing that her father and Lang Tao's topic was becoming increasingly serious, Zong Xiaofan knew they must have serious business to discuss, so she got up and went upstairs. After Lang Tao and Du Wei left, Luo Yi only received a few calls from her unit, the Provincial Foreign Affairs Office, and colleagues from the choir. No one else came to visit the house for the new year. The whole afternoon, the house was strangely quiet. Song Xiaofan and her mother sat in the living room, watched TV, ate melon seeds, and babbled at each other. The Central TV station's Spring Festival Gala was being replayed on TV. They had watched it more than once, but kept it on just to create a festive atmosphere. Song Xiaofan and her mother sat close to each other, with one hand around her mother's arm. She hadn't been this close to her mother for a long time. After being alone abroad for so many years, when she was lonely and unbearable, she longed most to be with her mother like this, like when she was a child, chatting, watching TV, and eating melon seeds. Only in middle age did she realize that even the most passionate love in the world was challenging to sustain, and only her parents had always been with her from childhood to adulthood. Thinking of this, she suddenly asked her mother, "Mom, why do I feel like Dad is indifferent to me, as if he doesn't welcome me home?" "Your dad's temper has become more and more eccentric since he started practicing Yuanji Gong. He doesn't like to talk much. He stays in the study all day long and usually doesn't even want to talk to me," Luo Yi said. "However, there is one thing that you guessed right. He disapproves of you coming back to China. No wonder I wanted to take you two to Beijing for a while last year, but Dad didn't want to go." Song Xiaofan gave an "oh" sound. "But why? Why doesn't Dad want me to come back to China?" "I can't say this clearly either. He never tells me many things, and I'm too lazy to ask. He's always been like this, always like there's a world between us. I used to think it was a habit of being a leader, but he's been retired for so many years, and he's still like this." Song Xiaofan heard a trace of complaint in her mother's words. She remembered what Lang Tao had said to her father in the morning and asked, "What was the name of that book Lang Tao had mentioned to Dad this morning? What's going on?" "Biography of Zong Da." Her mother said the name of the book in one breath. "Alas, don't mention this book. For a while your dad was so angry with this book that he stayed in the hospital for more than half a month." "What exactly happened?" Song Xiaofan became more and more confused. "I haven't read that book. I heard from Du Wei that it's a book about overturning the verdict on Zong Da. It also dragged your dad into it, saying that the Kuomintang launched a Trojan horse plan before liberation, subverting a group of high-ranking Communist Party cadres and secretly lurking in leadership positions at all levels, waiting for an opportunity to mess up the country, and also said that your dad was one of the cadres who was subverted." As her mother spoke, she became a little angry. "During the Cultural Revolution, some people falsely accused your dad of selling party secrets and being a big traitor, and a big hidden traitor. I didn't expect that after so many years, someone would still be making a fuss about these old sesame seeds. It's outrageous." Song Xiaofan not only knew about her father being criticized and imprisoned as a traitor during the Cultural Revolution, but she had also joined the ranks of criticizing her father back then. After the Cultural Revolution ended, she felt very guilty and apologized to her father in person. She didn't expect that after so many years, someone would still be holding on to it, so she couldn't help but be a little surprised. Who is the author of this book? Is he still Dad's old subordinate? "It's not him this time, it's a young man, a deputy editor-in-chief of Du Wei's magazine. I heard he used to come to your dad's house to interview him with Du Wei." "Coming to my house to interview with Du Wei? When was that?" Song Xiaofan was shocked again. She searched her mind, but she couldn't remember it at all. "Okay, don't worry about this matter. Didn't Lang Tao tell your dad that he has already asked the publishing house to stop publishing that book? Du Wei also talked to that deputy editor-in-chief." Luo Yi saw her frowning and comforted her. "What I'm worried about now is not this matter, but something else." "What is it?" "After the new year, your father will be 85. Each passing year means one less, and I'm 16 years younger than your father. When your father passes away someday, I'll still have many years to live alone, and you won't be able to return to Dongjiang to keep me company." As Luo Yi spoke, she became emotional, her eyes reddening. Song Xiaofan had never seen her mother so sad before. Her heart tightened as she grasped her mother's hand and asked, "Mom, what are you worried about?" "You know that your father once received party disciplinary action over this villa. According to the central government's instructions, all the original residents were supposed to move out. After several old Red Army soldiers wrote letters about the situation, the province adopted a compromise. They could stay. Still, the rent would be doubled, and they couldn't participate in the housing reform. This means that once your father passes away, this house will be taken back, and I'll be thrown out. Seeing her mother both angry and sorrowful, with tears streaming down her face, Song Xiaofan couldn't help but laugh wryly. Mom, Du Wei and his team are planning to build villas on Phoenix Island as studios for artists. They're inviting artists from across the country to move in, and I'm on the first invitation list. I've been hesitating. Since you're worried about having nowhere to live, I'll call Du Wei immediately and accept. The scenery on Phoenix Island is much better than here anyway. Later, if you feel too lonely living alone, I'll sell my Beijing apartment and come back to live with you. Hearing this, Luo Yi's tears turned to laughter, but the hint of a smile on her face quickly clouded as she sighed. After you broke up with Li Xin, you've been married to Bai Wen for several years now, yet you two live apart. You're 45 this year, and it looks like I'll never hold a grandchild. Had we known this would happen, your father and I shouldn't have pressured you to abort your baby when you broke up with Cheng Guojun. Her mother's words struck a painful chord, leaving Song Xiaofan speechless. The air in the living room seemed to freeze. Just then, children's excited cries came from the courtyard. It's snowing! It's snowing! She listened carefully, and indeed heard the soft sound of snowflakes hitting the walls and falling to the ground. That night, Song Xiaofan woke from her sleep and found her bedroom freezing cold like an ice cave. She got up to check and discovered the radiator had broken again. She quickly turned on the electric heater she had ready, curling up in bed, waiting for the room to warm, but she couldn't fall back asleep. From outside the window came the occasional sound of snow hitting the walls, accompanied by howling wind, sweeping in from all directions like a tide, as if threatening to engulf her entirely. A wave of indescribable loneliness welled up in Song Xiaofan's heart. She couldn't help but remember the year after her breakup with Li Xin, when she moved alone to the western suburbs of Los Angeles and rented a basement from a Turkish man who ran a barbecue restaurant. The basement was quite spacious, formerly a warehouse for storing ingredients, permeated with the gamey smell of lamb. The Turkish man had emptied it for rent because his restaurant business was poor. Soon, winter arrived, and Los Angeles winters were cold. One midnight, she woke up freezing. The radiator gave off no heat, and the basement was like an ice cellar. She wrapped herself in her only blanket, but still shivered from the cold. The bitter wind crept along the ground and through the basement exit, making a howling sound like wolves, making her feel as if she were in a northern wilderness, terrified to the extreme. She barely made it until dawn when the Turkish man brought her an old electric heater. Even so, she still felt cold. Especially at night, that bone-chilling cold spread from her limbs to her heart. Combined with her loneliness and isolation, she felt on the verge of collapse, unsure how much longer she could stay in America. If not for a later meeting with the graceful, literature-loving Taiwanese man Bai Wen, she might have returned to China much earlier. After leaving Li Xin, Song Xiaofan found work at a Chinese restaurant near Beverly Hills. Initially, she washed dishes, but after some time, the Chinese owner, seeing her refined demeanor and learning she had been a writer in China, made her a front desk receptionist, increasing her salary by nearly a third. Beverly Hills, near the western coast of Los Angeles, was one of the city's 9 wealthy districts. Most residents were Hollywood stars like Tom Cruise and Sharon Stone. Many stars enjoyed Chinese food. After being moved to the front desk, Song Xiaofan once saw Tom Cruise. He wasn't as tall in person as he appeared on screen, though he had a gentlemanly bearing. To showcase the quality of his restaurant staff, the Chinese owner specifically introduced Song Xiaofan to Tom Cruise, saying she was from China and had been a writer. Upon hearing this, Tom Cruise stood up from his table and curiously asked if she was working at the restaurant to experience life for her writing. When leaving, he bid her farewell. "Madam, I hope a Hollywood company will someday bring your work to the screen. If I could play one of the characters, I would be greatly honored." Though this was merely Western social courtesy, Song Xiaofan still felt her heart stir. Besides celebrities, some famous businessmen also own holiday villas in Beverly Hills. Once, the Chinese owner pointed at two men dining and said, "See that tall foreigner? That's Bill Gates." "Who is Bill Gates?" "My goodness, you don't know Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft?" The Chinese owner's mouth gaped in shock, as if she'd said she didn't know President Clinton or Bush. "He's one of the world's top 10 richest men right now." Song Xiaofan felt embarrassed by her limited knowledge. After the owner introduced her to Tom Cruise, many people heard the restaurant had a writer-waitress and patronage increased. The owner had enjoyed the benefits. This time, he took the opportunity to introduce Song Xiaofan to Bill Gates. But Gates seemed uninterested in the writing profession, merely nodding politely before focusing on his meal. However, the Chinese man dining with him turned his attention to Song Xiaofan and asked with interest, "You're a writer from mainland China?" After receiving confirmation, he continued, "I loved literature in college and read works by mainland authors like Xu Jimo, Ba Jin, and Eileen Chang. I almost made writing my lifelong career if not for meeting Bill." The man's tone and demeanor showed considerable refinement and sincerity. Song Xiaofan couldn't help studying him carefully. She saw he was about her age, around 40, with a fair, somewhat thin face, wearing glasses, looking like a university professor or engineer. Noticing her examination, the man made a small sound of acknowledgement, took a business card from his suit pocket, and presented it with both hands. "My name is Bai Wen. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft and Bill Gates' technical advisor." Song Xiaofan accepted the card, noticing a faint fragrance, unsure whether it came from the man or the card itself. After finishing their meal, Bill Gates and Bai Wen left. Song Xiaofan, the restaurant's receptionist, routinely escorted guests to the main entrance. Before getting into the car, Bai Wen specifically said goodbye. "Ms. Song, I hope to have the opportunity to read your work someday." With that, he followed Bill Gates into a Cadillac parked by the roadside and departed. Song Xiaofan could never have imagined that from that day forward, her fate would quietly change. 5. Island Tour. The snow that started falling on the 4th day of the Lunar New Year lasted for about a week before it stopped. The cold weather suddenly turned warm, and wherever the sun shone, the snow melted and everything came back to life. In a few days, the trees and grasses by the South Lake and the courtyard began to sprout green buds, indicating that spring would soon arrive. Just after the Lantern Festival, Du Wei suddenly came again. This time, he accompanied Song Xiaofan and her parents to Phoenix Island for a spring outing. "Song Lao, Auntie, last time Mr. Ba and Miss Hong came to Phoenix Island, they also wanted to invite you two elders to go. Sister Fan came home for the new year this time, so it's a good opportunity to invite your whole family to visit the island." Du Wei said this to Song Qiankun and his wife, flatteringly. But Song Xiaofan knew that the real reason was to see the environment of Phoenix Island. She had already told Du Wei that she agreed to live in the art village of Phoenix Island. Du Wei was very happy to hear this and immediately reported to Lang Tao, who also asked him to convey his welcome to Song Xiaofan. "We must start the Art Village project as soon as possible so that all artists can move in as soon as possible. This is what Deputy Minister Lang said," Du Wei emphasized. "Besides me, which other artists have agreed to move in?" she asked. Du Wei smiled. "Sister Fan, oh, don't worry. With a great writer like you taking the lead, are you afraid that no one will come?" According to Du Wei's introduction, the restructuring and listing of Polipar Art Media Group and the development of Phoenix Tourist Island were all key cultural development projects in the province under Lang Tao's responsibility. Among them, the Artists' Village was a sub-project of the overall plan to develop Phoenix Island tourism. In addition to providing each artist with a villa with a total area of not less than 1,000 square meters, the Artists' Village would also exempt artists who established film and television companies, animation companies, and other artistic creation companies in the Artists' Village from taxes for 5 years. The purpose is to build a nest to attract phoenixes and promote the leapfrog development of artistic creation in our province." Du Wei waved his hand, appearing very ambitious, and his tone and expression were very similar to Lang Tao's, or rather, he was deliberately imitating Vitsu Minister Lang. Song Xiaofan wasn't interested in these things. The reason she agreed to move to Phoenix Island was entirely for her parents. After wandering abroad for so many years, she really should create better living conditions for the two elderly people. She told her mother about this idea, and her mother was so happy that she couldn't keep her mouth closed. Phoenix Island has been developed well in recent years. I haven't been there yet. I'll take a look one day. So, when she heard that Du Wei would accompany them to Phoenix Island for a spring outing, she readily agreed. Not only did she change into the formal dress she usually wore for choir performances, but she also prepared outfits for her father. "Your dad rarely goes out. I don't know where the formal wear he used to wear for meetings and entertaining guests has gone." But Song Xiaofan felt that, unlike her mother, her father didn't seem interested in going to Phoenix Island. Du Wei had already driven the Audi downstairs, but Song Qiangkun was still in the study, holding a copy of Wugong's secret manual with no intention of getting up. Luo Yi dragged Song Qiangkun up from the sofa and said irritably, "Old Song, don't you usually nag me about wanting to visit Wu Bozong, the Qigong master of the Wugong Shrine? Now that you have the opportunity, why are you being so unenthusiastic?" Her move cornered her father, and he followed her downstairs. Just as they got into the car, Luo Yi remembered something and suddenly asked Du Wei, "Little Du, is the villa in the so-called artist's village given away for free, or do we have to pay to buy it?" Du Wei seemed to have known that she would ask this question and smiled. "Auntie, you don't have to worry about this. Although it can't be said to be completely free, you only have to pay a symbolic amount, which is almost the same as free compared to the market price." Luo Yi was obviously not satisfied with this answer and asked another question. "Are there property rights? Don't be like the house we live in now." Du Wei said confidently, "Auntie, we have already considered these concerns for all the artists. The 2 certificates are complete and can be listed for sale like other commercial housing." Only then did Luo Yi nod in satisfaction. Song Qiangkun, who had been sitting next to her without saying a word, suddenly coughed and said, "Little Du, you tell Lang Tao that we must pay attention to policies on this matter." Du Wei quickly nodded. Yes, old Song, we will definitely pay attention." Luo Yi glared at Song Qiangkun and said sarcastically, "I think you were bitten by a snake once and are afraid of ropes for 10 years, right? Lang Tao and the others are engaged in a key provincial cultural project. What policies are there?" Song Qiangkun seemed too lazy to argue with her. He pulled down the duckbill cap on his head, lowered his eyelids like usual when practicing Qigong, and didn't say a word. Song Xiaofan sat in the front passenger seat. In the rearview mirror, she saw her father with a head full of white hair, looking old and frail. Sitting next to him, her mother was wearing a cashmere coat and a bright red scarf around her neck, making her look even younger than her father. The entire journey from the city to Nyangzu district was on the expressway, and it took less than an hour to arrive. Du Wei drove the Audi onto the ferry, and Song Xiaofan got out of the car and stood by the railing, looking towards the lake's center. The sky was blue, the lake was vast, and the shadow of Phoenix Island was faintly visible. The waves splashed against the ferry hull, and a few drops flew onto her cheeks, icy cold. Her heart felt a trance, and her thoughts drifted, as if she had returned to the distant past. It wasn't Song Xiaofan's first time at Nyangzu Lake, nor was it her first time at Phoenix Island. More than 20 years ago, after graduating from junior high school, she voluntarily signed up to settle down in the countryside. The place she went to was Nyangzu County. At that time, there was only one stone road from Dajiang City to Nyangzu County, and it took more than half a day to get there by car. Therefore, for this group of junior high school students who had just left school, Nyangzu County, although a suburban county of Dajiang City, seemed to be ancient and far away. At first, the educated youth temporarily lived in the homes of poor and lower-middle-class peasants, eating and living with the villagers, and even their clothes were often washed by the landlords. Later, they built houses themselves by the side of Niangzhu Lake and built educated youth centers. After moving in together, they could only rely on themselves for eating and laundry. The educated youth center had a cafeteria. Everyone ate and worked together. At first, it felt very lively, but many unexpected contradictions came after the novelty wore off. They were only 15 or 16 years old, grew up in big cities, had never left their parents, and were used to a life where they didn't have to lift a finger for clothes or food. The harsh conditions of the educated youth center far exceeded their imagination. Not to mention anything else, just the food in the cafeteria was unbearable. In the summer and autumn, all 3 meals a day were radishes and cabbage. In the winter, it was pickled vegetables and dried radishes. It wasn't easy to see even a trace of oil in the vegetable soup. Over time, everyone couldn't bear it anymore. They started to do it themselves, to be self-sufficient. One by one, they began to find ways. Some wrote letters asking their parents to buy rice, oil, and meat in the city and send them, and some adapted to local conditions and found food in their own way. There were many fish and shrimp in Niangzhu Lake. Getting some fish and shrimp to eat meat wasn't tricky as long as they were willing to use their brains and put in the effort. So, everyone in 2s and 3s started their own small stoves to cook. Some were male-educated youth and male-educated youth partnering, and some were mixed male and female-educated youth. Most of the mixed male and female pairings had already established a romantic relationship. They had been half concealing and half revealing it before, but now they simply took this opportunity to make it public. Several temporary families appeared in the educated youth center for a time. As a result, the cafeteria of the educated youth center automatically disbanded. At that time, Song Xiaofan's father was still being reformed in the May 7th cadre school and belonged to the children of black gangs. No one was willing to partner with her, so she had to live alone, sometimes full and sometimes hungry. Due to malnutrition, her originally thin body became even thinner. One evening, after she returned to the dormitory after work, she was busy cooking on an adobe stove. The firewood was wet, and she blew on the fire for a long time but couldn't light it, and her eyes were streaming with tears from the smoke. Just as she was at a loss, a male educated youth suddenly broke into the door, pulled her away, stuffed a piece of waste newspaper into the stove, and then snatched the blowtorch, aimed it at the stove, and puffed out his cheeks and blew hard. A flame suddenly burst out from the smoky stove. Only then did Song Xiaofan see clearly that the person who helped her light the fire was Guo Liang, who was in the same group as her. Seeing Song Xiaofan looking at him, Guo Liang grinned his thick lips, smiled honestly, and said, "If you don't object, let's partner together." Faced with this sudden proposal, Song Xiaofan was stunned and didn't react for a moment. Guo Liang was of medium height, with thick eyebrows, big eyes, a square face, and a wide nose. He was very strong and always wore a sailor's shirt. She didn't know if he didn't have a replacement or if he was reluctant to part with it. He was reluctant to mend it, even with several holes in it. Guo Liang's parents were both workers at the Dongjiang steel plant. Probably because of his family environment, he usually worked hard and never complained. Whether cutting reeds or harvesting rice, he always rushed to the front. After finishing, he didn't go to play like other educated youth, but went to help the uneducated youth who were lagging behind. Once, when she went to the lake to cut reeds, Song Xiaofan was far behind everyone, and seeing that it was almost dark, she was anxious. She heard the sound of a sickle cutting reeds from the opposite side. She stood up and saw that Guo Liang was helping her cut reeds with both hands. Guo Liang was introverted and didn't like to talk, especially in front of girls. He was shy, like a big boy. Although he and Song Xiaofan were in the same group, the two rarely spoke. Only once, when it rained and they didn't go to work, she sat at the door of the dormitory, holding a copy of Smedley's biography of General Zhu Dai. Guo Liang walked back and forth in front of her repeatedly. Only then did she notice him, put down her book, and ask, "Guo Liang, is there anything wrong?" Only then did Guo Liang stop, a little embarrassed, and say, "Can you lend me this book after you finish reading it?" When Song Xiaofan went to the countryside to settle down, she brought a lot of novels from home, but she had finished reading them all. This biography of General Zhu De was recently bought from the Xinhua bookstore in Nengzhu County a few days ago. "Of course, I'm almost done reading it. I'll give it to you tomorrow." From then on, Song Xiaofan lent him those novels she had brought from home individually. Little by little, she gradually learned more about Guo Liang and knew that he had also liked literature since he was a child, but there were many siblings in his family, and there was no money to buy books. Sometimes he could only read a few comic books at the comic book stalls on the side of the road on his way home from school. Common interests narrowed the distance between the two. Song Xiaofan and Guo Liang partnered together. From then on, Guo Liang went to the lake every few days to get some fish, shrimp, lotus seeds, and water chestnuts. There was never a shortage of meat in their bowls. He also forked 2 wild ducks in the autumn, each weighing 3 pounds. That day happened to be the Mid-Autumn Festival. The two of them invited the educated youth from the group to have a feast. Several female educated youth who usually ignored Song Xiaofan said to her with envy, "Song Xiaofan, you are so lucky to have found such a capable boyfriend like Guo Liang." Her face turned red when she heard this, and she seemed to realize that Guo Liang was her boyfriend. In the spring of the second year, as soon as April began, it began to rain continuously. People who had been staying in the Educated Youth Center for half a month were getting moldy. One day, Guo Liang suggested, "I heard from the fishermen that there are a lot of snakes on Phoenix Island. Let's go to the island to catch snakes. Snake meat is a delicacy in the world." Song Xiaofan had also heard the local villagers say this, so she couldn't help but be tempted. The next day, they called 2 educated youth from the same group and went to Phoenix Island together. They borrowed a fishing boat, put on long rainproof and mosquito-proof rubber boots, took a basket for snakes and enough dry food, and set off. That day, the wind and waves on Nyangzo Lake were particularly strong. It would have only taken half an hour to reach the island, but it took more than an hour. After landing on the island, 2 fishermen wearing straw hats who were mending fishing nets by the lake heard that they were here to catch snakes and looked terrified, saying that snakes were dragons on the ground and would be punished if they were offended. The few who heard this thought it was ignorant and ridiculous and didn't take it seriously. They went straight to Xiaolong Mountain. It was said that the snakes on the island were concentrated on Xiaolong Mountain. A damaged Guanyin temple was on the mountain, and a martyrs' cemetery was at the foot of the hill. It was said that after the Dongjiang Provincial Party Committee and the hospital of the military region were surrounded by the Kuomintang returning group before liberation, more than 100 cadres and wounded soldiers were buried there. Before going up the mountain, Guo Liang suggested visiting the martyrs' cemetery to pay respects to the martyrs. During that time, he was reading the biography of General Zhu De that Song Xiaofan had lent him, and his mind was full of the bloody rain and wind of the Revolutionary War. The other 2 educated youths had also read this book, and a few people hit it off immediately. They picked a few bouquets of azaleas and winter springs in the wild forest by the roadside and entered the cemetery. Seeing the dense martyrs' tombstones in front of them, filling most of the hillside, they couldn't help but feel a bit shocked. They put down the bouquets, faced the rows of tombstones, lowered their heads, and stood silently for 3 minutes. After leaving the cemetery, they began to climb the mountain. Xiaolong Mountain wasn't high, but the mountain road was rugged, with strange rocks covered with thorns and various shrubs. Before landing on the island, Guo Liang had done his homework carefully and was more familiar with the situation on the island than they were. While climbing the mountain, he introduced dozens of kinds of snakes on Xiaolong Mountain, including pythons, cobras, rattlesnakes, water snakes, and bamboo vipers. The largest pythons were more than 10 feet long and as thick as bowls. But they weren't poisonous. If you were bitten, you could pick a few rami leaves by the roadside, chew them up, and apply them to the wound, and it would be fine in half a day. The smallest bamboo viper was no bigger than an earthworm but highly poisonous. If it weren't rescued in time after being bitten, the toxicity would spread to the whole body within 2 hours, and the person would be beyond saving. Hearing this, Song Xiaofan suddenly felt a sense of horror and hugged her shoulders tightly in fear. Seeing this, Guo Liang said softly, "Don't be afraid. I brought snake medicine." Seeing that dark face, sturdy body, and the sailor shirt with a few more holes, she felt much more at ease. Since the two of them had been partnering together, Song Xiaofan had gotten used to Guo Liang's protection. By the time they reached the middle of the mountain, they had already caught 2 snakes, both of which were caught by Guo Liang. Although the 2 snakes weren't big, the few people felt quite a sense of accomplishment. Song Xiaofan never expected that danger would quietly arrive at this time. When she passed through a low bush, something bamboo-colored suddenly jumped out from the thorns next to it and landed on her arm. She felt a burst of pain like being stung by a wild bee and couldn't help but cry out. Guo Liang, who was walking next to her, heard it. He turned his face, and his face suddenly changed, exclaiming, "Oh no, you've been bitten by a bamboo viper." Saying that, he hurriedly took out snake medicine from his pocket. Before the snake medicine could be applied to the wound, she fainted. When she woke up, Song Xiaofan found herself lying in a hospital ward in Niangzhou County Hospital. After the IV drip was finished, a bottle of medicine solution was hanging on the bed frame. Guo Liang was sitting next to her. His eyeballs were covered with bloodshot. His face was haggard, and the stubble on his chin was like a patch of weeds. Later, Song Xiaofan learned that even after she applied the snake medicine, the toxicity of the bamboo viper still didn't stop. If she couldn't be sent to the hospital for rescue within 2 hours, she would likely be in danger of her life. Guo Liang was anxious and carried her down the mountain, running all the way to the lake, driving a fishing boat across Niangzhou Lake, and sending her to the county hospital before the toxicity broke out. The doctor said she would have been beyond saving in another half an hour. Half a year later, Song Xiaofan's father was liberated from the May 7th cadre school and was reinstated as deputy governor. Soon, she was recruited back to the city and entered the Donggang Cultural Troupe as a member of the cultural troupe. At first, she played the violin, and later she became a writer. The reason was that she had published a novel in the literary supplement of the provincial newspaper entitled Dreams on the Island, which was about the experience of catching snakes on Phoenix Island. In the novel, she replaced Guo Liang with the letter G. On the day she left the Educated Youth Center, Song Xiaofan went to say goodbye to Guo Liang. But when she arrived at his dormitory door, the door was tightly closed, and there was no sign of him. After Song Xiaofan received the recruitment notice, Guo Liang stopped partnering with her. She felt that Guo Liang was deliberately avoiding her. Not long after that novel was published, Song Xiaofan heard about Guo Liang's death from an educated youth. He drowned in a storm while sailing from the Educated Youth Center to the county town to transport cotton to the purchasing station to save an educated youth who had fallen into the lake. At that time, Guo Liang had already become the captain of the educated youth team. The Niangzhou Lake County Revolutionary Committee held a grand memorial service for Guo Liang, awarding him the title of Wangji-style hero and outstanding Communist Youth Luhag member, and called on the educated youth of the county to learn from him. After hearing this news, Song Xiaofan locked herself in the cultural troupe dormitory for a whole day without going out. Du Wei also exited the Audi and was smoking a cigarette by the railing. As soon as the ferry docked, 2 people came to the ferry and found Du Wei. Du Wei brought them to Song Xiaofan and introduced them, pointing to a middle-aged man wearing a mink hat and saying, "This is Nie Changhai, the village party secretary of Phoenix Island." Then he pointed to a black-faced man wearing a military coat with pimples all over his face and said, "This is He San, the director of the security department of Wugong Shrine, also known as the Yuanji Culture Research Association. They are here on behalf of the Phoenix Island Village Committee and the Yuanji Culture Research Association to welcome you and Old Song. Yesterday, Vitsu Minister Lang called and told us to take good care of the old governor. Nia Shanghai said while looking at the Audi car parked on the deck. Du Wei reminded him, "And Teacher Song, she is a great writer who has returned from the United States." Nia Shanghai immediately turned his face and cupped his hands to Song Xiaofan, saying, Yes, welcome, Teacher Song. Great writer." Heisan, however, remained silent next to him, his eyes constantly scanning the Audi car. Du Wei obviously understood what they meant and winked, saying, "Don't disturb old Song. Let's talk about it after landing." Only then did the two respond and return to the shore. After the Audi car landed, Song Xiaofan saw a team of people standing on the dock, wearing gorgeous ceremonial costumes, standing tall and proud like a guard of honor. Nie Shanghai and He San, whom she had just seen on the ferry, stood at the head of the team. As soon as the Audi car approached, He San shouted in a drawn-out tone, "Salute!" The team then saluted the Audi car in unison. Du Wei was obviously used to this kind of formation. He lowered the windows of all 4 car doors and waved to the team outside while introducing Song Xiaofan, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, and also to the Song Qiangkun couple in the back. "This is the Wugong Shrine's Guard of Honor, personally trained by my godfather." "Little Du, I'm no longer a provincial leader. There's no need to create these scenes." Song Xiaofan heard her father grumble from behind. "It's a must!" In the rearview mirror, Du Wei told Song Qiangkun, "My godfather has been looking forward to your arrival. He repeatedly instructed that you be received as a first-class VIP. Last time, Boss Bia and Ms. Hong came, and He San and the others came to the dock to welcome them. Your reception standards must not be lower than theirs, right?" While speaking, the Audi car drove out of the lakeside dock. Song Xiaofan saw in the rearview mirror outside the car window that the Guard of Honor was riding Suzuki motorcycles of the same color, escorting them in the middle. Heisan's motorcycle was at the front of the team, and Nie Shanghai was driving a convertible electric car at the back, forming a mighty motorcade. The motorcade drove to a fork in the road. There was a prominent sign by the roadside. A road on the left pointed to Wugong Shrine and the Martyrs Cemetery, and a road on the right pointed to the resort hotel and the sightseeing farm, all clean and smooth asphalt roads. Du Wei slowed down and turned his face to ask Song Xiaofan, "Sister Fan, shall we go to Wugong Shrine first, or the resort hotel and the sightseeing farm? The future artist's village is in the area of the sightseeing farm." Song Xiaofan couldn't decide and was about to ask her parents in the back when she heard her father say, "Go to the Martyrs Cemetery." The voice wasn't loud, but it sounded unquestionable. Du Wei didn't seem to understand and asked, "Old Song, are you saying go to Wugong Shrine?" "No, the Martyrs Cemetery." Although the Martyrs Cemetery and Wugong Shrine were both on Xiaolong Mountain, Song Qiangkun's destination was clearly clear. Song Xiaofan turned her face and looked back, seeing that her father's face was a bit gloomy, like it was covered with a layer of frost. She seemed to understand something and winked at Du Wei, who was a little puzzled. Du Wei then drove onto the asphalt road to Xiaolong Mountain. Phoenix Island was only so big, and it took only a few minutes to reach the foot of Xiaolong Mountain. Compared with more than 20 years ago, the topography of the mountain had undergone earth-shattering changes. The whole mountain seemed to have been stripped of a layer of skin. The desolate thorns and bushes of the past were gone, replaced by carefully landscaped plants, flowers, and trees. At the foot of the mountain facing south, an asphalt road wound directly up to the top of Xiaolong Mountain. The roadsides were lined with green trees and colorful flags. At the end of the road, a majestic palace-like building could be seen, which was exactly the same as the picture of Wugong Shrine on the huge billboard erected at the foot of the mountain. To the north of the foot of the mountain was a gravel road. The road surface was bumpy and covered with waist-deep weeds, making it look a bit desolate. Song Xiaofan vaguely remembered that she and Guo Liang had gone back to the Martyrs Cemetery from this road. Du Wei hesitated and drove the car onto the gravel road. The motorcycle team behind didn't follow, but went directly to the Wugong Shrine on the top of the mountain led by He San. Only Nie Shanghai followed in a convertible electric car. Like the sides of the gravel road, the entrance to the Martyrs' Cemetery was also covered with waist-deep weeds. Compared with more than 20 years ago, there was almost no change. The only addition was a high cement wall built on the south side of the cemetery, completely separating the cemetery from the Wugong Shrine on the other side of the mountain. Other than that, everything remained the same. Clumps of foxtail grass grew in the gaps in the low stone walls on both sides of the cemetery, swaying lonely in the wind. Next to the gate was a small stone house, and a dog was squatting at the door. Seeing the vehicle approaching, it barked warily twice, turned its head, and burrowed into the half-closed stone house. After a while, an old man with a copper-colored face walked out of the stone house, wearing a felt hat and an old coat. Seeing the vehicle parked at the cemetery entrance, his face also showed a wary expression. At this time, Nie Changhai exited the electric car, walked up to the old man, and whispered a few words. Then he returned to the Audi car and said to Du Wei and everyone in the car, "The old man's surname is Yu, and he was the principal of our Phoenix primary school. People on the island call him Old Principal. His family all died before liberation and are buried in the cemetery. After Phoenix Primary School moved to Chengguan, he didn't want to leave, so he stayed on the island to guard the cemetery." As he spoke, he leaned his head into the car and looked at Du Wei, saying, "Ask the old governor, does he want to go into the cemetery?" Du Wei turned his face from the driver's seat and asked softly, "Song Lao, do you want to go to the cemetery to take a look?" Song Xiaofan turned her head and saw that her father's face was still like it had been hit by frost, without any expression. Hearing Du Wei's question at this moment, he didn't answer but instead looked through the lowered car window at the desolate and dilapidated cemetery in front of him, staring for a long time. After a long time, he withdrew his gaze, raised the car window, sighed imperceptibly, and waved his hand, saying, "I'm not going in." Du Wei and Nie Changhai seemed to be waiting for this sentence and breathed a sigh of relief in unison. Then, they drove the Audi and the convertible electric car to the top of Xiaolong Mountain in a flash. Before the car arrived, they saw a sea of people in front of the majestic palace with drums and music sounding together. The guard of honor at the dock was lined up in 2 rows under the command of He San, saluting the motorcade. Behind them, a team of women in Tang Dynasty maid costumes held flower rings and colorful flags, jumping and cheering, "Welcome, welcome, a warm welcome." Du Wei exited the car first, opened the back seat door, covered the upper part of the door with one hand, and bowed and said, "Song Lao, please get out of the car." Song Qiangkun and Luo Yi got out of the car one after another, and Song Xiaofan walked next to her, holding her father's arm. At this time, the welcoming crowd suddenly parted, and Song Xiaofan looked up and saw an old man walking out of the gate, wearing a Tang suit embroidered with the Tai Chi pattern, with white hair, a youthful face, and an air of immortality. He walked over, surrounded by He San and Nie Changhai, and cupped his hands to the Song Qiangkun family, saying, "Welcome, welcome, Wu has been waiting for the great leaders for a long time, please." After saying that, he took one of Song Qiangkun's hands with the courtesy of a host and walked towards the gate of Wugong Shrine. Song Xiaofan and her mother walked behind. Looking at the old man walking side by side with her father in front, Song Xiaofan, who was walking behind, thought that this must be the famous Master Wu. While thinking about the legends she had heard in Beijing about this Yuanji Gong inheritor, Du Wei approached her and said, "My godfather has long wanted to invite old Song to Wugong Shrine for a meeting. They are both masters and must have a lot to say." Song Xiaofan pondered Du Wei's words, thinking, what common language would there be between a high-ranking Communist Party cadre who has been retired for many years and a Yuanji Gong inheritor? The shrewd Du Wei seemed to have noticed her doubts and said in a low voice, "Song Lao has been practicing Yuanji Gong all along." Song Xiaofan gave an "oh" and raised her head to look around, noticing a young woman following behind Master Wu, wearing a black professional suit, with a slender figure and a beautiful face, wearing a headset on her ear and holding a walkie-talkie in her hand like He San. She felt that she seemed to have seen this woman somewhere before. Just as she was about to ask Du Wei, Luo Yi suddenly pulled her arm and said, "Looking at this posture, your dad and this Master Wu won't be finished talking for a while. Let little Du take us to stroll around the island?" Song Xiaofan knew her mother's thoughts were all on the villas in the artist's village. Besides, she had only been to Phoenix Island more than 20 years ago, so she also wanted to see the new changes on the island. She told Du Wei what her mother meant, and Du Wei agreed without hesitation. As the few people turned around and walked outside, Song Xiaofan couldn't help but look back again, seeing the familiar woman following Master Wu and her father towards the reception room. That tall figure and dignified temperament once again convinced her that she must have met her before. But who was she? It was almost noon when Song Xiaofan and her mother, Luo Yi, strolled around the island and returned to Wugong Shrine, accompanied by Du Wei. The meeting between Song Qiangkun and Master Wu had also ended. Du Wei said that the resort hotel had prepared a sumptuous lunch. Just now, Secretary Shu Ku of the Yuanji Culture Research Association called to inform him that Wu Bozong and Song Lao were talking very speculatively and had decided to change the lunch to Wugong Shrine. "My godfather said he wanted to invite your family to taste his personally handmade snake feast." After Du Wei finished speaking, he emphasized, "This snake feast is not something that everyone can eat." Du Wei didn't know about Song Xiaofan's experience of being bitten by a snake on Phoenix Island 20 years ago. Since then, not to mention eating snakes, even smelling the snake meat would make her dizzy and vomit. So she immediately said, "I don't eat snakes. Please arrange another place for me to eat." Du Wei was stunned. "Why?" Song Xiaofan shook her head palely and said nothing. Du Wei wanted to ask again, but Luo Yi pulled his arm and said, "Don't ask anymore. Just follow your sister Xiaofan's instructions." Du Wei realized something and agreed. Song Xiaofan had lunch in a small private room in the restaurant. After lunch, she stayed alone for a while. The experience more than 20 years ago seemed like yesterday, and it was still vivid in her mind. If it weren't for Guo Liang, she might have stayed in Yangzhou Lake forever. Thinking of this, Song Xiaofan's eyes were filled with tears, and she did not realize it. After lunch, Master Wu and his entourage escorted Song Xiaofan, Song Qiangkun, and Luo Yi to the foot of Xiaolong Mountain. The motorcycle team, led by He San, then escorted them to the ferry port, just as they had done when they arrived. While waiting for the ferry, an unexpected incident occurred. A few people suddenly appeared from nowhere, all dressed as locals with ragged clothes and miserable faces. They surrounded the Audi, kowtowed, and shouted. Since they spoke the island dialect, it was unclear what they were shouting. From how they cried and screamed, it seemed they had some grievance. "What are these people shouting?" Song Qiangkun asked Du Wei with a frown. Du Wei was obviously surprised as well. His face suddenly changed. He said, "I'll go down and ask." Then he opened the car door and got out. At this time, He San and several security guards also rushed over. Without giving any explanation, they pushed and shoved those people who were kneeling on the ground and crying, and then explained something to Du Wei in a low voice. Du Wei's face was livid. He waved at them and returned to the car without saying a word. He said to Song Qiangkun, "Song Lao, these are some stubborn residents on the island. They refused to be relocated, demanded exorbitant prices, and petitioned everywhere. Now, they even ran to the ferry to stop the car. It's outrageous." Song Qiangkun said, "Oh," but didn't say anything. Du Wei glanced at Song Xiaofan, shook his head helplessly, and said with a wry smile, "These unruly people are so unsatisfied now. How can it not be better to let them move to Chengguan than to stay on this isolated island surrounded by water?" Song Xiaofan also didn't say a word. She saw from the rearview mirror that her father had his eyes slightly closed, his hands clasped together in front of his chest, and an aloof expression as if he didn't care about anything else. She couldn't help but wonder what he had talked about with Master Wu for so long. After the ferry had docked, Du Wei drove the Audi onto the ship. The question was still lingering in Song Xiaofan's mind. 6. Letter from Zong Tianyi. Although Ouyang Peidu had reached retirement age, it was recently heard that he was applying for a delay in retirement to get some shares after the Polupar Art Mudia Group was listed. Moreover, it was said that the leaders of the supervisory unit, the Provincial Federation of Literary and Art Circles, and Du Wei had agreed. Therefore, Wang Sheng was a little surprised to hear the news of Ouyang Peidu's retirement. In the years since he entered the magazine, although Ouyang Peidu initially regarded Wang Sheng as Du Wei's man and was somewhat wary of him, later, probably seeing that Wang Sheng was just a scholar, his attitude towards him changed 180 degrees. Gradually, Ouyang Peidu became estranged from Jiang Xin, with whom he had initially been close, but became closer and closer to Wang Sheng, treating him as one of his own. Wang Sheng himself couldn't explain how this subtle change in interpersonal relationships happened. Ouyang Peidu once joked to him, You're really a bookworm. You might not even know if you were sold one day." On the day Ouyang Peidu officially completed his retirement procedures, he specially called Wang Sheng to his office. Probably because the plan to delay his retirement hadn't been realized, he looked somewhat dejected. Wang Sheng wanted to say a few words of comfort, but he didn't know how to start. While searching for the right words in his mind, Ouyang Peidu closed the office door and said to him, "The candidate for editor-in-chief has been decided." Wang Sheng was a little confused when he heard this. "Jiang Xin will replace me as editor-in-chief." Ouyang Peidu said angrily, "It's so fucking fast. I haven't even moved out of the office yet. They really can't wait." Wang Sheng was very surprised to hear Ouyang Peidu, who never swore, utter a curse. Just as he was about to say something, Ouyang Peidu looked at him fixedly and sighed with regret. "You were originally hopeful. In terms of ability, you are far above Jiang Xin. If it weren't for that book, you tell me, what couldn't you have done? Why did you have to write biography of Zong Da?" After hearing this, Wang Sheng remained silent for a long time and said indifferently, "It's nothing. It's good this way. I never thought about becoming that editor-in-chief at all." After speaking, he came out of Ouyang Peidu's office. The next morning, when Wang Sheng went to work, he was stopped by old Liu at the gatehouse. "Deputy Editor-in-Chief Wang, you have an express delivery." Wang Sheng thought it was another submission. Authors nowadays were afraid that their manuscripts would get lost, so they liked to use express delivery, which was fast and safe, but it added a lot of trouble to the editors, who often had to sign for it on the delivery slip. He scribbled his name on old Liu's slip and walked upstairs with the mail. Walking into the office, he opened the mail and saw a stack of printed manuscripts inside, attached with a handwritten note with a line on it. "Wang Sheng, by the time you see this letter, I will no longer be in this world." The signatory was Zong Tianyi.